Today, I'm with disability activist and teen drama fan Jessica Gimeno. Hope I pronounced your last name correctly. You can tell me if I didn't. Jessica, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you for having me.
Jessica, we met through the Beverly Hills 90210 fandom, specifically through the Beverly Hills 90210 show podcast. I think we would comment during the live streams, and somehow we realized we went to the same college, Northwestern University. I love that you're representing the Wildcats right now with your purple Northwestern shirt. So I thought Beverly Hills 90210 seems like a good place to start. What are your earliest memories of the show?
So, Beverly Hills 90210 was so huge in the 90s. It was everywhere and it was watched by all age groups. So, during the first few seasons, which were the most iconic seasons, you would go to Kmart or Venture and there were 90210 dolls, just like there was New Kids on the Block dolls, there were 90210 dolls just to set the stage what the time period was like. And I actually was not allowed to watch during the first few seasons because I was literally a child. And my mom was like, "You're six, you shouldn't watch this." So, which was the right call because yeah, there's some materials that are, but it was like there were people who were like 66 watching, and then there were people who were six watching. So, and it was like that just tells you how like you couldn't escape it. Even though I wasn't watching, I knew who Brenda and Dylan and Kelly were.
Okay.
Like I knew, even though I wasn't allowed, rightfully so, to watch. Like that's how big the cast was. That's how iconic. Oh shit! I'm sorry.
You're,
There's an alarm to take medicine. I'm sorry. Is that bad that I swore?
you're fine.
Okay, so that's that's how huge 90210 was, and it was on for 10 years, so I kind of consider it a time capsule of music, fashion, and norms in society changing for better and for worse. And I saw the finale live, and so I was in high school when the finale aired, and I remember I was running late to get home because I think it had like I was on school paper, so I think it had something to do with that. And I remember like thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna miss the finale of Beverly Hills 90210," and so I watched it live, and that was like, it was just it's an iconic show.
What do you love about it? Why have you been a fan all these years?
Well, so I guess the chemistry of the cast is, I met Anson Williams Potsy from Happy Days,
Mhm.
and he had said something about chemistry. It's like lightning in a bottle. Either you have it or you don't. And that's why casting is so important. I also think that there's two shows that influence my sense of style where I get style tips from, and that's 90210 and Mad Men.
Okay.
There's things that Kelly and Brenda wore that I would wear today, or like Kelly has really fair skin and I do too, so I like she wears some dresses like the royal blue dress she wears to a house party, the red dress in season 6. Those are like the styles I wear. Brenda also wears some great red dresses. And then like Mad Men, I like the color palette of Joan, and I
Okay.
prefer colors over Prince. So those two shows are the ones that influence my style. And then I also think like, so the couples, obviously there's some very famous couples that came out of 90210. My favorite is Dylan and Brenda. I know we're a little different there, but also the friendships. Like there's some really great, like you see these nuances because it lasts for so long
Right.
that you pick up on, like Kelly and Andrea have a friendship that is unlikely, that you wouldn't think would develop. Dylan and Andrea have a similar friendship. There's like these little moments between friends that you get because the show was more than like 4 seasons, that you can
Mhm.
watch these friendships evolve with people that you think they would have nothing in common, but that's not true.
Right. Well, you're also a fan of regular soap operas, not just teen soaps. And I was struck by something you said to me recently that watching these shows is one of your coping mechanisms. And I have always thought that way. And I think it's something that people don't really understand.
Yeah, people like to put down soaps, and you know, some people call it a guilty pleasure. I feel like if you feel like, you should only feel guilty about liking something if it's like you're hurting somebody else, like it's immoral. You
Yeah,
know, if you have, or like if you have a reason to lie about something, like why are you doing that thing? But so I watched Days of Our Lives and for over breakfast, and I watched General Hospital over dinner. And General Hospital has been on for 60 years, and Days is almost 60 years old. I think it's like 58 years old. And it takes a lot of creativity to keep these storylines going.
right.
And when I watch Days, it's supposed to be set in Illinois, which is where I'm from. And during the winter, it never snows. There's
Oh,
no ice. People are wearing t-shirts, and like they're not bundled up in layers. They can walk everywhere. And I was
yeah.
telling my friend, I'm in a group chat, and I'm like, about Days of Our Lives. There's six of us. And I said, Days is a fantasy about winter in the Midwest without snow, ice, and seasonal affective disorder. I'm like, that's what I think this is. So it's escapism, right? So like you see these people, I'm like, I don't want to see them deal with the same problems I'm dealing with. Like I like the fact that there is no ice and people aren't arguing over parking spots in January. I'm like, I don't want to see that. So yeah, General Hospital. And the other thing is like, so the other Northwestern connection we have is that
Yes.
Agnes Nixon is a wildcat. She went to Northwestern. She's
And
a
she's
graduate.
responsible for my favorite soap, which was Guiding Light.
Yes. And All My Children and One Life to Live. So my grandmother raised me on the three ABC soaps,
Yeah.
All My Children, One Life to Live, and General Hospital, and only General Hospital is standing. But the other two are around for 4 decades. And so collectively, she gave me anyway 80 years of television, because I didn't watch Guiding Light, but I
Mhm.
would have been open to it. But
Yeah.
like that was like, it's amazing. We used to have at least 9 daytime soaps on the air every day, and now we only have 4 left. So
Yeah. It
it's
feels
kind of
like that.
scary. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like,
You hit on two things that I love here. You said how people consider them a guilty pleasure, and that drives me up the wall because I feel no guilt about loving these shows, and there's no reason to. And I think people that use that term, they use it dismissively, and they use it without actually having watched a substantial amount of these programs, and therefore don't have a really holistic idea of what they're capable of, how they move people, the creativity involved. It's just so easy to dismiss, the teen dramas as teeny bopper shows or things like that, or the daytime soaps as melodramatic. The reason those have lasted, 60 years is because of what they mean to people. And you said how, your grandmother raised you on those three shows. Guiding Light is because that's what my mom watched, through socialization. The daytime soaps have passed on from generation to generation. And very much for me, as you said, they have been an escape, growing up in my childhood and young adulthood as I struggled with friendships and making friends. Kelly and Dylan and everyone else were my friends. They might not have known it, but watching them that was my life. That was my escape from the real world. And of course, there's aspiration involved and things like that. But with Guiding Light, keeping up with the goings on in Springfield and what the characters were up to, it's like this parallel universe that we got to witness, and it's so comforting in times of joy and in times of sadness that we can go back to these things and they're
absolutely.
there for us.
I find that when usually the people who put down soaps the most have never watched them.
Agree.
So they'll be like, "Oh, are you watching one of those terrible daytime soaps?" And then they've never watched. And it's, funny story on like a more, I
Mhm.
mean, well, the beginning of the story is not so funny. So my mom was in a freak accident in 2019. She's doing much better, but so she was in a freak accident, and so she had to, she had to recover. And when she came home she was in the hospital, and then she went to rehab. And when she came home, she had to stay home because she couldn't do anything. And so she would see me watching soaps because she couldn't go anywhere.
Mhm.
And she'd be like, I would never be caught dead watching this. It was Days of Our Lives. She's like, I don't know what you see in these shows. And then like 5 months later, she was hooked. She was just as hooked as I am. And she'd be like, did you see that? Did you get to the December 14th episode yet? I'd be like, no. She's like, well, tell me when you get there. You're not gonna guess who killed Charlie. She's like, who do you think killed Charlie? And I'm like, I don't know yet. And she's like, why don't you know? And I'm like, because I have grad school. I have too much homework to finish. I'm behind. So she got hooked too, and she'd be like, you'll never guess. And then she would be like, I would never be caught dead watching this. And she even said, she's like, how do they keep these shows going on for 50, 60 years? She
Yeah.
said, where do the writers get these ideas?
Mhm.
And it's so true.
Yeah, some of the storylines do become repetitive, certain triangles or things like that, or something we see now happened 15 years ago. But there's something to be said for the creativity involved in the way these shows are crafted. The reason your mom got sucked in is because they are well crafted to draw people's attention and to get you interested in seeing what happens next and next and next. And they don't get credit for what they successfully pull off.
Yeah, they don't get enough credit. And a lot of the tropes in daytime soaps are in primetime shows,
Yeah.
but they have the patina, they don't have the stigma because it's on at night.
Right. Yes.
So they don't, like I used to watch Grey's Anatomy, and one of my friends who was also raised on General Hospital, and his friends who put down General Hospital, but they watch Grey's, and
Ugh.
they'd be like, did you see this episode? And he'd be like, I saw the original Grey's Anatomy. It's called General Hospital. He's like, they didn't invent making out in the closet. Doctors making out in the broom closet.
Right.
Like that they don't have a monopoly on that. Although that's really unsanitary, speaking as a patient advocate.
But
If you
your point stands. There probably wouldn't be a Grey's Anatomy if there had not been a General Hospital.
yeah, that was his like. That's why it gets frustrating when people put them down. And there's stories you can tell with daytime soaps that you can't tell anywhere else because they're on 51 weeks a year. So it was a groundbreaking story on General Hospital in the 90s where they had a main character get HIV, and he died. He died of AIDS. And it was a really groundbreaking story because before then, when popular shows would address the story, they would bring on a character the audience had never ever seen before, and they would come on for one episode, and that was their storyline about HIV or AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
So like Designing Women, I love Designing Women, but they bring on somebody that you'd never seen before, and then at the end of the episode this character died of AIDS. But General Hospital took these two characters. So Robin Scorpio, she'd been on the show since she was a child, and so we've actually seen her from playing a 5-year-old when she was literally a child to being like 40. But at this time in the 90s, she was a teenager. And so her character, a main character, a legacy character, was dating another main character, and they had unprotected sex, and he didn't know he had HIV. And so you watch the story unravel in real time where somebody has symptoms of something, they don't know what it is, they get a diagnosis, and there was a great stigma at the time around that. And you watch the progression of a person's illness in real time like it would be in real life. You wouldn't fast forward to the end like you would in a movie, or if you had a show that was on 22 episodes a year, you'd have like a large summer break and it'd be once a week. So that's why we feel this connection with the characters, because we're watching them literally grow up from child to middle age, and we're watching the actors age too, and we're aging alongside of them. So there's this really deep connection that goes on, and you can tell a story. Like One Life to Live had a story. It was graphic, but it was well done. It was about the gang rape of Marty Saybrook, and it was really way ahead of its time, the story. And you see this person go through the dealing with the justice system, healing physically, emotionally, and how it affects all these characters. It's an umbrella story, and it happens over the course of years, because we know when things happen to us, we don't just like move on next month. And so it's actually, in a weird way, like I saw something on Days, and it was like, they did a time jump, but basically the character's baby died, and then like you see her go through the grief, and
Mm-hmm.
then a few years later, so I'm like, because you watch this every day, and I'm like, Sarah's doing better, and you're like, yeah, that is true. Like, you can be doing better in life, like you don't forget about the bad thing that happened to you, the loss, but it's almost inspiring to see the way characters handle tribulations, because you're watching them do it every day, not even every week, but every day.
There's a slow burn quality to it, and we become so connected because, as you said, in there's 51 weeks of the year, and it's not just a weekly, it's a daily show, weekday show. You become so connected because they are in your lives on a regular basis, far more than any other TV show would be. And I'm really glad that this conversation and the examples you cited moved into the direction of the health world. I'd like to talk about your advocacy. You yourself are disabled, and I was hoping you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have a blog called Fashionably Ill, and I it's about surviving pain, mental and physical, with style and a sense of humor. So I write about mental health issues, and I have a YouTube channel that is just my name, Jessica Gimeno, and I do videos on stuff like how to exercise if you are depressed, or I did something about the pandemic, identifying your top 10 coping mechanisms. I guess my one of my most popular YouTube videos was about, it was called Depression, Ghosting, and Bipolar Disorder,
Hmm.
or some, I can't remember the exact order, but it's about ghosting and its relation to depression and bipolar disorder. I'm most known for my TEDx talk.
Mhm.
It's called How to Get Stuff Done When You Are Depressed, and it's won a few awards. And you could see that, How to Get Stuff Done When You Are Depressed, on my website or on YouTube.
How does this advocacy and the things that you deal with impact your life? Why is it what you're passionate about? Because not everybody who is disabled becomes a spokesperson of sorts for the community and fight for change. What makes this something that you've gravitated toward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think there's one sentence that can sum it up. I think when you're disabled, you deal with ableism in every institution. So in housing, so 90% of disabled households in America, the people living in them, the houses aren't disability accessible, which is dangerous. Transportation, we deal with ableism. School, we deal with ableism. Employment, so it's like every area of your life. And I remember I was working with someone on something, and it was about ableism in school, and she's like, well, you don't know if you'll win, but we should try. And she said, every time we try, we make it easier for those who come behind us.
Yeah.
There's somebody that comes after us, and they benefit from the work we do, from the advocacy we do.
How do you feel people like you are represented on TV? Because I'd say you're underrepresented in two ways, in terms of your health and in your race.
Yeah. So I get that, there people are, I think first it's like hard to portray chronic pain, right? What would you do exactly, right? How do you show that's why even like people living with invisible illness, if you live with pain or fatigue, they're not believed by their own doctors, family, and friends. I've actually seen, there's like some romance novels that have started having protagonists who have serious health problems,
Oh,
and that's interesting. I'm like, oh, okay, that's like, where the woman has doctor's appointments and she's in
yeah.
pain, and like it's not, um so it's interesting. Then with disabilities, so some people in the disability community get upset when there's so few disabled characters in comparison to, we're the largest marginalized group, but if you watch TV, we were underrepresented, and sometimes those roles go to people who are able-bodied.
Mm.
And so there will be things like, I love the show Superstore, but one of the criticisms was, because you don't have lived experience in the writing and the acting, like they'd be somewhere that was obviously disability inaccessible, and then the character who's in a wheelchair would like magically get in there,
Yeah.
when in real life you couldn't go so many places we couldn't go. So those are things that we have to be mindful of, is that there's no substitute for lived experience. on the issue of race, things have gotten better. You know, like I love 90210, but it's, you know, one of the criticisms is that it wasn't very diverse and
Yeah,
it didn't represent the reality of the time period. So I'm from the Midwest, which is why Beverly Hills 90210 is escapism. Right? Like I said, I don't want to watch a show where people are like, you know, arguing over chairs and who gets the parking spot in the middle of February. That's like, you know, that's boring. But you see these like really good looking people and you're like, I don't know, is that what it's like to live in Beverly Hills? Okay. And people have said that, so I've never lived there, that there wasn't a Persian population. And that was like at that high school in
yeah.
that area, there's a high Persian population. So that wasn't represented. Later, there was a criticism of the OC that Asians weren't represented. I do like the final years of 90210, they did have an Asian female romantic lead, Janet. And I actually thought Steve and Janet's story was the best storyline of the final seasons
I love that.
because I felt like it was really interesting because Steve is like the last character I would have thought of the male characters to marry someone of a different race.
Yeah,
Like if you told me Brandon or David, I'd be like, that wouldn't, I'd just be like, yeah, I got it. That like I wouldn't even think twice. But
right.
Steve, it was really interesting because you showed his father. So we've seen this character off and on for 10 years, and his father was like, we never saw what his father thought of people of other races because it
Mhm.
wasn't, you know, he wasn't on every week and Steve hadn't dated somebody who was different. But when his father tells him, wouldn't you be better off with someone like yourself? And it takes him like a minute to get it. And it like, it was sad, but realistic watching, you know, and Janet didn't want to introduce him to her parents. And he calls her out on that. And, you know, we're still having these conversations over 20 years after the show went off the air, but I still think it's important that they had a female romantic lead who was Asian at that time period. That was almost, it was almost unheard of.
And I want to give them credit for that. And I absolutely do that they had a series regular of Asian descent. And yes, they were in a romantic relationship and it was a mixed race relationship. Absolutely. But I think we also have to note that Lindsay Price was playing a character who's Japanese and she herself is not Japanese. She
Yeah.
is of a different descent. So it's like, man, you almost hit the home
Done better. Yeah,
run,
they could,
but you didn't.
the final season writers, they could have done better. And that's why we need more diversity in all facets of it, right? Writing, casting, because you make mistakes like that, like an unforced error like that.
Yeah.
Uh, that wasn't, yeah, they could have done much better. I think, yeah, that's where lack of, you know, same thing with disability, like there's no substitute for lived experience.
Yeah. I want to ask, staying on this topic, did you watch the show A Million Little Things?
No.
Okay. It was a drama on ABC.
Oh, you know why? It was like triggering for me. I saw the
Yeah.
first episodes and I
Okay.
was like,
That's
this is too
fine.
much like my life. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want to watch
So,
a story
yes,
about my,
mental health
yeah,
is a big part of it. A lot of people have compared it to like a worse version of This Is Us. But partway through the series, I'm gonna give you spoilers. But partway through the series, one of the main characters is hit by a car and paralyzed. So he spends the remaining years of the series in a wheelchair. And there has been, discussion over the years of whether it was the right decision to have an able-bodied character and actor go in this direction, because now you've had an able-bodied actor play a disabled character for years to come. And on the other hand, you've had, fans saying why can't there be some miracle where, this much time has passed and now he's able to walk again? And the show is very adamant about not going in that direction because that's not really true to reality. People who are paralyzed, like 99.9% of them are staying paralyzed. And so they tried to portray that authentically. And at times that they would point to um, people, writers in the room with experience of with relatives or things like that. There was Alzheimer's and dementia storyline in the last season, and that was, built around some of their own familial experiences. And so I think that we see progress, but we see imperfect progress.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's imperfect. Yeah, I think that's courageous. Like I said, I've had some events happen in my life that when I saw the pilot, I was like, okay, this is like too much like
Yeah,
things that in my real life I can't watch this. But a lot of shows when a character does become disabled, seriously disabled, they somehow become able-bodied again.
yeah.
And so I think that's a courageous decision without the context, so I can't really say because I'm
Yeah.
not watching. So it sounds like it from what you're describing, but yeah, it was too close. It was like, this is too close to home. So I didn't watch it.
Well, on a lighter note, last year we binged The Summer I Turned Pretty together, and now we're watching the second season together as well. And I can't thank you enough for turning me on to this.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Did you see last night's episode?
No, because I want to watch it with you. I'm
Oh,
guessing
okay.
you watched it without me. I'm
I'm
guessing
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible friend. I'm
we're gonna
terrible.
still watch it. You're gonna be watching it again
Yeah,
with me at some.
that's true. I will watch it again with you. Yeah, I just like, how I got into Jenny Han. So I was like, I would never have gotten into it. And my friend Erin, she had gotten me to watch To All the Boys I Loved before, and I had said at the time, I'm too old for this. It's like I'm too old for this to appreciate this. Like I'm too old for this. I didn't read the books. And she's like, no, you're gonna love it. And I loved it. Right. So I watched it and it was like so much fun. And that was also it was fun for many reasons, not just one, but the diversity was kind of shocking to me because I wasn't used to growing up. Their teenagers and their shows I watched, they didn't look anything like me.
Yeah.
And so to see the protagonist, an Asian female, and with black hair, it was just very interesting, And then so Jenny Han made that To All the Boys I Loved before, and then I heard Summer I Turned Pretty was coming out on Amazon Prime, so I bought the books. And at first, I was like, I'm like, I don't want to spend too much money. So I bought just the one book because I was like, what if I don't like it? And then it was torture waiting several days for the second book to come in the mail because I want to know what happens next and I don't know. And this is actually the changes she's made. So there, you have to make some changes, especially because the plot of book one is so slow, which is fine for a book, but going to TV, I think this is like the best adaptation I've seen
Wow.
where most of the changes are like they enhance the plot and the
Mhm.
development of the characters. And she's done a really good job.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
What?
I think it helps that she serves as the showrunner. A lot of times books are adapted to TV and movies not by the person who helmed them. And sometimes that's for better, sometimes it's for worse. Not everybody who writes a novel has the talent to then go helm a television show, but she's actually really proven to be a double threat in that regard because she has turned a successful book series into a successful TV series, and that's a credit to her. And it's so funny what you said about All the Boys I Loved before and your first reaction that you're too old for this. When the first trailer for The Summer I Turned Pretty came out, season one, I remember thinking that it just felt very young.
Yeah.
Me, this teen drama freak, felt like this looks a little too childish for me. And then I watched it with you and fall in love,
Yeah.
sucked into the same teen drama tropes, but different. Each show does it a little bit differently. And I have the couple that I ship, and I'm excited about season two.
And
And
we ship the same couple. So
yes, thankfully.
yeah, we're on the same team on this
Yeah,
one. Yeah. We're on
are
the same
Conrad
team. So
and Ellie
we're
fan.
both, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we're Conrad. I mean, the thing is like,
no, go ahead.
I like Jeremiah, but I like Jeremiah and Belly's relationship too, but I want Conrad and Belly to be endgame, but I think that's what makes this such a compelling love triangle is that both couples have their arguments
Yes, for
in
sure.
favor of them.
And to bring this conversation full circle, because we started with 90210 and the teen dramas and whatnot. As we were watching the first three episodes of season two, I pointed out to you a few times things that were like, oh my God, this is just like Pacey and Joey in Dawson's Creek. And then since
Yeah.
then, you found some memes online on Twitter of people making the same observations that I did, that how some scenes and storylines seem to be almost identical. And now I think today I got a Google alert highlighting some of those things as well. And it just goes to show the groundwork that the teen dramas laid, 20, 30 years ago, and how some of the same story beats are alive and well today. And, we wouldn't have The Summer I Turned Pretty without the shows that came before it. And it's exciting to think, especially in terms of representation, what shows we're going to have after this, thanks to The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Yeah, it's like, so obviously the biggest difference between Summer I Turned Pretty and the shows before them is that there's a diverse cast. So like we were just, growing up, all of the leads were white, but there's some striking similarities. So like the couples don't communicate well, and that leads to misunderstandings. That's like an ongoing theme,
Yeah.
right? That happened a lot in 90210. And then the biggest similarity I think is like, I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are like ridiculously good looking, right? You look at the triangle, you're like, where did you get these people, right? So it's kind of like 90210 in that way. You're like, this is like, they're like, you're like, this is ridiculous. They're like, they're so beautiful. And there's only one member of the cast who's actually a teenager, which is the protagonist. Lola Tung plays the protagonist, and everybody else is very much, they look like adults, which is very 90210. That was the joke, was that half the cast, like they were obviously
Older,
good looking adults pretending to be teenagers. And that's a joke about Riverdale too, is like, okay, we've got like, 25-year-olds pretending to be 17, and it's funny. It makes me laugh because like if you know the books, okay, that person is he's supposed to be 17, but
right.
Yeah. So those are like some constants, like bad communication, adults pretending to be teenagers.
Yeah.
Those are the
Love
constants.
triangles.
Obviously love triangles.
Well, to me, that's the number one ingredient in a teen drama is a good love triangle.
Yeah, a good love triangle.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see how the rest of the season unfolds. And while season 3 has not been officially announced yet, I think it's
They
all
said they doubled the viewership from season 1. That
yeah.
was in the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, it's torture for us because our viewing habits have changed so much.
Yes.
To not get the whole season. I don't know how many episodes there are in the season, but to not get it all at once. But I think it's great for their promotion and their marketing.
Yeah. It's a bit of a throwback that we have.
People are waiting with bated breath on Twitter, and you're like, what's going to happen next?
I had no doubt that you were going to watch the episode. No,
I'm sorry. I'm a terrible friend. This is the cool thing about soaps though. So I have one friend, we coincidentally met through watching soaps, but we were raised on the same soaps.
Okay.
And we have like 99.9% of the same taste in TVs, movies, pop culture, music. And we're like, how can we not be twins? But he's 6 years older than I am, and he has blonde hair and blue eyes. So I'm like, we can't be twins. But we try to watch like one episode of General Hospital or Days together once a week. And I coach high school debate, and the state championship is 3 days long, which is a really long time when you watch a daytime soap to not watch 3 episodes. And I remember one year he's like, I just watched without you. I'm sorry. I couldn't.
It's so easy to fall behind because there's a new one every day. And before you know it, so many episodes have gone by. Jessica, this was lovely. I love talking with you. I think you just radiate just positivity without being false about it. You are very honest about the realities of your life and the people who are in positions similar to yourself, but with an attitude that I really admire. And of course, I just love talking about these shows with you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for being an unapologetic fan of our soaps, teen dramas, and just all the soaps that we have.
Always, to my grave.
Yeah.